Hello, 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 hello.
Hello. Morning.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody. All right, can everybody hear us? If you can see us and hear us, can you wave, please? Okay, perfect. So I'm assuming everybody else that's not showing their video can hear us as well. Let's see. I'm just gonna give you guys maybe another couple of minutes before we get started, let people come chime in. All right. I think we have a good amount of people in here, right? We good? All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Joelle Fontaine, and I am the Assistant Director over at the Fairmount Innovation Lab. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We've been working really hard with Dorchester Bay just to figure out how we can assist you during this time. So this series is a 3-day series that's going to be really helping you guys navigate your cash flow. So if you're an existing business, and right now I know everybody's trying to figure out what is their next step, where are they going to find money, this is what this particular workshop is for, to look at how much money you will personally need, where you can find the capital, and also just to navigate your own personal cash flow. So there will be a technical assistance piece at the end on Friday at 11 a.m. that you guys can schedule a one-on-one consultation with. So thank you guys so much for coming in. A little bit about the lab. The Fairmount lab is located in Upham's Corner. We are a co-working space as well as a resource for small businesses, mainly small businesses in the social and creative field. So we've been working really hard to make sure that while people are home and kind of dealing with this COVID-19 crisis, that you guys have the resources that you need, that we're getting workshops online. We recently, last week, we did a marketing workshop. In the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a marketing workshop. We're going to have our last session for that on this Wednesday. So I hope all of you guys have RSVP'd for this. I know there are different sources out there where you could find the link to come into the meeting. So if you haven't RSVP'd, please make sure you do so that if we're sending out any type of resources, that you guys can actually receive them. But without further ado, I'm just going to introduce Johnny Charles from Dorchester Bay. So take it away, Johnny.
Get myself off of mute for a second. Thanks, Joelle. Good morning, everyone. It's a little weird to be on a webinar where you can't necessarily see the responses from individuals. So luckily for you all, I can easily entertain myself. So I tend to be pretty corny, and so I can laugh at my own jokes. I can call in response to my own things. Not to be too narcissistic here, but I am perfectly comfortable with silence. So that's for the most part is a good thing. So I am Director of Economic Development for Dorchester Bay, which is a CDC, which is Community Development Institution. And so community development from the respective perspective of affordable housing. We do real estate development projects as it relates to affordable housing. And there's a number of them throughout the city. We're particularly located in Dorchester. Our catchment area is North Dorchester. And so a lot of CDCs work particularly in the functions of not just real estate, but community organizing, advocating, education, youth literacy, and so on and so on. We support what we call the Neighborhood Loan Fund, neighborhood business loans. And so we're a subsidiary of Dorchester Bay. So what that means is that it's an organization within this broader parent organization in which where we administer loans to small businesses. They're commercial loans that are really about revitalizing community neighborhoods, small economic areas, particularly focused and targeting communities of color. So minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, immigrant-owned businesses, particularly communities and businesses that live and operate on the margins. All right. And so that's a little bit about the CDC world in Dorchester Bay. But I want to go into what the team is and what our objective is for the day. But slightly before we do that, let's, can everyone see the presentation, the PowerPoint? Raise your hands if you're on video and just holler at me on chat and say yes. Just want to make sure everyone can see it. No? Okay. Brenda, am I projecting or are you projecting? All right, I know I can see it now. All right, I'm getting some nods. Sophia, good look. I see you. That's only because your camera's on, so you're kind of out there. Joelle, good look. I see you. I know you're nodding. I'm gonna highlight you regardless. And all right, perfect. Cool. So a little before I do individual introductions, let me just say that we don't want to go into this tone deaf, right? So a lot of what we're talking about is access to capital, and what we mean by that is what are the different terms, what are the different things that are related to capital, how do you define those things, and what does that mean for your business, right? We want to level set a little bit before we go into how do you manage cash flow. So from our experience, particularly my own experience, it's kind of hard to go into profit and loss, income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements, and talk about finance without really talking about what finance means, what goes into it, and what are the certain languages and terminology that goes into all those things. And so we want to take a couple steps back and talk a little bit more about what capital is and how we define that, so that when you go out and you're looking for additional capital, and we're talking post-COVID-19 at this point, that you know exactly what that language is. On top of that, we also know that individuals are dealing with a lot as it relates to financial constraints. So we're going to talk about capital, but we also want to measure expectation in terms of, we also want to share additional resources, information related to what's available out there for individuals who are, which is all of us, who are dealing with the implications and ramifications of COVID-19. So I just want to say that in terms of grant opportunities and things like that, we'll post those things. A lot of this is for you to kind of work on your business and taking this time right now to kind of really understand what your business needs actually are. How do you manage the cash flow that you currently have? And then once coming out of COVID-19, what are the creative ways that you can look at capital, manage capital, and implement some things that we can probably share with you. And at some point, we're going to give you an actual template that kind of details a little bit more about cash flow, details a little bit more about when we talk about capital and assets that you can use, and then we'll support you one-on-one from technical assistance, which just means like free business counseling hours starting on Friday, so you can navigate through the tools that we're going to give you. So I just want to put it out there in terms of what exactly are we doing here. I just want to put out there exactly what that looks like for the next couple of days, particularly for this week. All right. Thank you. So I'm just gonna say hi one more time, and I'm gonna let both Anthony and Brenda say hi as well too. I think it's kind of weird and kind of whack for me to kind of fill in your own voices as you have your own. So Johnny Charles, originally from here, Boston, Mass. I am a son of Haitian immigrants. So I was originally born in Dade County, Florida, Miami. So for those of you who are familiar, what up? And my formal years were spent living in Haiti before I came here. And the reason why I do that is because a lot of that is part of my own identity, my own personality. So as it relates to my own experience, I think there's something meaningful about the immigrant experience, particularly immigrant business owners. And oftentimes when I share the broad spectrum of my own identity, I feel like people feel like their story is being resonated within that as well too. So just want to share a little bit more about who I am. And it's hard for me not to talk about a little bit my own experience, who I am throughout the presentation. So you'll hear a little bit more about myself throughout the presentation. So take it away, team.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Johnny. My name is Anthony, and I'm the loan officer with Dorchester Bay. A little bit about myself. I am the son of immigrant parents. My parents came here in the 70s, and my dad is a small business owner. He's a barber. So I know the effort that goes into it to try to keep a small business going. And sometimes you're pulled away from your family to try to take care of things that the business needs. My day-to-day interactions really involve working with small business owners within Dorchester and the surrounding communities. And I do provide, or we as a team provide technical assistance, business consulting, and we also provide access to capital via loans, which I'll be talking a little bit more about further along in this presentation. I look forward to this, and it's a lot of fun. This will be fun.
Nice. Hi, everyone. My name is Brenda Bobadilla. I am a Mexican American, also from immigrant parents. I have worked, my first two jobs have been one, a family-owned business, a small business, and then another startup business. So I have that type of experience where as an employee, I had to take on multiple responsibilities in order to help the business sustain itself. And I enjoyed it. It was great. My responsibilities when it comes to Dorchester Bay is mostly loan servicing and the compliance aspect of it. But I'm also very excited to share some resources with you and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Joao, is it okay if I play some music that's aligned with the theme of this webinar? You can give me a thumbs up.
Go to town.
All right, all right. So for those of you who remember this soundtrack and this song, I was talking to my group last week about this particular movie. So they know where the movie is from. But I want to play this and either give me a nod or a smile, say what up, give me a salute if you remember this song. Let me put this on real quick. And this is one of two, because I'm going to play an outro song at the end too. And if you don't like music, I apologize. No, not really. You remember this? Yeah. Sophia, give me a nod or something. Let me know something. Let me know something. You know you're on blast. Let me know. Do you remember this? Okay, all right, okay. Perfect. All right, okay, all right. Back to business. I apologize. So the reason I put that on is because that's Mo Money. And so for those of you who remember Mo Money, so this is part of the Wayne's Foundation in terms of their family foundation. And there was a story about two brothers, hustlers, who were trying to make as much money as possible. And they actually got to it, right? But the end of it all, in terms of the story, this spoiler alert, was the fact that they realized money wasn't everything, right? And so I think a little bit about this presentation, we know money helps, we know money matters, and we know that it'll take you so far. But at the same token, there are other aspects of small business when we talk about capital that matter much more. And so money is a tool. And so I want to get into the fact that we're talking about this tool, not particularly the fact that it is everything to the business or you. No, that's okay. We can move on. So just want to open up that way. So some things that we've heard as it relates to lending and money. I'll start off with the bottom, which is the plain and simple. Aren't they all banks as it relates to lending institutions? I don't know where to start. Whom do I contact, right? Bankers and investors are all a black box. How can businesses get funder ready? Banks don't lend to Black and Latino owned businesses. And I'm not going to read all of these because, I mean, these are quotes that you all have shared. For the most part, this is all both true, and then some of it is a myth, and then others come from some deep-rooted facts about our community in particular. So I want to just highlight one particular aspect of the community relationship as it relates to institutions, lending institutions, with a little-known fact. Let's move on to the next slide to talk about that a little bit more. Oh, actually, no, we're not going to get into that just yet. No, we'll go on to the next slide. But before I ask you guys the question, those particular quotes were related to how individuals feel about institutions. And I think within the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about where some of those came from. But for the most part, the fact that before we move on, it's really good to really understand what are individuals' objectives and goals as it relates to this conversation about capital. So, and I think individuals, I think it's probably appropriate if folks probably take off mute, or you can use the chat function below. So what we're looking for is tell us a little bit more about your hopes and fears as it relates to capital, as it relates to lending, or it could be about this particular presentation. What is it that you're looking forward to? And what is it that you really want to hear about? So when you received a message about this webinar and this presentation, I'm sure some of you had some clear expectations about what you were looking to hear. So at this time, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about what some of those things are. And if you don't want to unmute yourself and share, please put in a message in the chat function. Let us know what that is for you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Chris. I have this idea to start my own freelance graphic design business, and I came across the email for this webinar, and I want to, this is my first time actually getting into the whole entrepreneurial phase of, owning a business or whatever, and I'm still learning, and I would like to, I was just interested in learning, about, getting information about the webinar and, learning what capital is and how capital works, and what it takes to fund a successful business.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you taking the initiative on that. I appreciate that. And please excuse the silence. I'm just gonna read some of the what's been typed in the chat. I have one here, which is one of my favorites because this comes up a lot. My fear is not to be able to repay my loan. Thank you for that. To repay. I'm just going to write some of these down because I want to just come back to some of these at the end.
Hello, my name is Cece. I own an event rental business, and one thing that just for me with this whole COVID-19 thing and funding and looking at the different loans available and the different things the banks are offering, it just was, and the things that they're asking you to collect in order to get certain applications funded and stuff like that. This was attractive to me just because I realized like certain things weren't in order the way I probably wanted them to be.
Mm-hmm.
Or even looking at the fact, like, I didn't make a lot of money in my business. Like, I'm making enough to cover my overhead, but not enough to like give me a salary yet. So they're, just to get unemployment, certain things like that, they want to see what you're paying yourself, but I pay my staff before I pay myself. So just looking at the options there in terms of, because I personally like invested in my business and I didn't look to loans or things like that, which I wish I did, and kept my personal like, cash flow. So it's just kind of looking at the big picture to see like when I get out of this, when we get out of this quarantine stage, like where I can continue to move my business to make sure I'm prepared for something like this again. So.
Thank you, Cece. I appreciate that. So you're currently breaking even and looking to reach profitability, but you're taking this time to kind of prepare for post-COVID-19, if I'm gathering that correctly. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So I appreciate that. I'm just going to check out to see if there's anything more in the chats. I have someone here who is asking, does credit matter as it relates to borrowing? I have someone looking for general information, similar to Chris, not being able to repay their loan, repaying loan in a sluggish economy, very true. Looking for different ways to fund my business moving forward. I just started my business. I want to scale. I'm on a path to being profitable. Listening in to get clarification on what's available and what eligibility requirements are. Perfect. All right. All right, so we'll get into all of those things. I just want to be clear. We're going to talk about the general qualifications for a small business loan, some of the things you should know. And I know most of you have heard of the 5 P's or C's. There's a couple of them. There's a P set and there's a C set. And we'll talk about the 5 C's in this one. And we'll talk about this. So that's the overall general eligibility. We'll touch on those, and then we'll touch on eligibility as it relates to us, which is a little bit different because there's some things that we don't necessarily take into account. We will record in our own due diligence process, but there are certain things we don't take into account as a mission-based lender, and there's several of us here throughout Boston. And then, so as it relates to your goals, thank you. And as they're posted up here, here are our goals, 2 main ones, right? Demystifying the fundraising process and increasing your eligibility to get funded. And then I have another one, guidance on if this is the best time to start up or a brick and mortar business. Yeah, so that's a good one. That's a good one. So let's get into that and understand too. This series is all together. It's just that it's a series. So a lot of the answers to some of these questions will be today, and then there's some others that you'll need to do some type of analysis for as it relates to your business idea, or your current business, which is going to require you to bring in some data as it relates to what you're doing right now. And so we'll bring all that together for Friday, but just keep in mind that there's some essential tools and information that we'll need in order for you to kind of run the financial analysis to figure out how do you move forward when we're projecting beyond COVID-19. We'll talk a little bit more about that as the presentation goes on, and we'll get into the nitty-gritties about what all that means on Wednesday, but keep in mind that we're going to require some information from you. And if you're just here and you haven't started up yet, congratulations for making it onto the stage for starting a small business. But you won't necessarily need too much information unless we're talking about just industry specific information. And we'll let you know by the end of this presentation what we mean by that in the Q&A. All right. So this is the overall agenda for the presentation. We're going to talk a little bit more about trust, as I alluded to earlier on. Talking about having a clear plan, starting early, knowing your end game, which is really one of my favorite slides. And for those who have the inside scoop on that, they know why. How much your business can realistically borrow, which has a couple of different answers to it, and understand the lender's perspective, which goes back to what I was saying before in terms of the 5 C's. All right. So I don't know how many people have or are familiar with Freedman's Savings Bank, which was early 1800s, I believe. No? Okay, maybe not. All right, so it's just that in terms of, this was a financial institution that realized that, as in part by the government, realized that there's opportunity in the free slave population, knowing that they can collect an additional piece of revenue from newly freed slaves, right? And then it was also an opportunity for those who were recently freed to not just invest back into the economy in a legitimate way, although we can definitely surely say that we've been contributing to the economy in a lot of legitimate ways. But it was an opportunity to kind of save, invest in themselves. But let's put on the next bullet point. The bank itself failed, right? And usually when I bring this up, and I'm gonna breeze through this a little quicker than I usually do, only because I think there's so much more to touch on. There was the bank itself failed, right? And at the time, at least as it's been recorded, as it's been shared with me, there was already the initial mistrust in institutions, knowing that it's not supportive of them, particularly African Americans in this country. But then there was also dual understanding in terms of how it failed. And one of the main reasons why the bank failed was because the board chair somehow, some way, got the board of the bank to invest in a business that they had personal connections with. And once the business went under, the bank went under. And as you can imagine, if a whole bank is gonna go under because of one business, then they probably had a large share and stake in that company and in that overall industry, which it did. So which led to the demise of the actual bank. But unfortunately, the theory, the notion following the failure of the bank was the fact that it wasn't built for us, by us, so therefore it wasn't supportive of us, which I think is partly true. But I bring this up just to say that there's this natural inclination not to trust an institution, considering the long history of mistrust and exploitation of small minority communities, right? And those things are healthy feelings to have, but unfortunately, they can't necessarily consume your decision making in terms of, I will not bank for whatever reason without any evidence. And what I'll do is I will store my cash on my own. I'll go to a payday lender, which we'll talk a little bit more about, checking cash in place to cash my checks. I will invest in different things, but I won't necessarily invest in myself. And so having a bank relationship is really, really, really important. And this is less so just about banks and financial institutions. This is about the fact that we've had a long history of mistrusting institutions in general. And this is not to say that mistrust is not right. This is to say that we acknowledge that that's the case. And so for us here at Dorchester Bay, we realize that in order for us to do lending well, to do it responsibly, and to do it in a way that that puts you forward, particularly the community first, is we have to establish relationship first. So usually when we do this presentation and we have this slide, and this is the time where I'll ask you all different questions about trust and try to establish some basis of trust one-on-one. But considering the fact that we're on a webinar, it's a little different. So I just want to go into and acknowledge the fact that trust is important and building a relationship is important. And that's what we try to do first. And we do that by the way of technical assistance. And that's where the relationship actually starts. So we just want to point out the fact that this element is important before we move forward. And we're not saying that we have your trust, and we're not saying that we all trust each other, but we want to just acknowledge the fact that it's important to move forward considering that that's needed.
So following up with what Johnny just said, it's very important to establish these relationships with banks, but it's also important for you to be careful with predatory lenders. So a predatory lender is anyone who has unfair terms and targets certain borrowers. And as Johnny said, sometimes these are the cash places within our own communities. And I have a couple of examples here of predatory lenders. So just be very careful when you reach out to lenders. Make sure that their terms are something you can meet, and it's nothing that that is just very unrealistic or have certain other like little terms that, like for example, something, what was it? If it's in order for you to pay your loan or to close it out or whatever, there's like a huge payment you have to make. Anything that seems unfair or unreasonable, or like increased interest rates, anything like that, keep an eye out. because this would be one of these predatory lenders that we're speaking about here. And if you look to the right, there's a couple of examples of predatory lenders and the types of complaints and how these complaints get resolved, and it's quite interesting. So definitely check that out. And now that we've spoken about having trust and being careful with predatory lenders, it's important that you also have a clear plan and that you do this research so you can know who to reach out to. And today we're going to speak about equity, receivables, debt, crowdfunding, and other resources that you can look into. And Anthony is going to take this.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you, Brenda. So this slide here represents, well, all of these slides coming up will represent different ways to access capital. First one shown here is with regard to equity. And equity really is when you share a stake of your company with someone else, either a friend or family member. There are also angel investors and venture capitalists out there as well that may be willing to provide you with some funds or some access to some capital so that you can reinvest it into your business. But in doing so, you're going to share a percentage of your profits or a percentage of your ownership, whatever the agreement is, with that other party. It works in some cases, and in some cases it doesn't. If you're familiar with Shark Tank, they do a lot of this equity financing, or they do the equity deals for the most part. This is one that you may or may not be familiar with. You're probably familiar with the way that it's done, but it's debt financing, and really it's raising capital either by your own credit cards or taking loans out from a bank. There's the SBA, the Small Business Administration, which Dorchester Bay partners with, and we do small business loans or micro loans. Oh, sorry, Brenda, somebody stated that the slide isn't showing for them. I don't know. I can see it on this end.
Can everybody see the slides, Johnny?
I can see it. I'm getting a couple head nods that.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Just perfect. We're good. Yeah. So debt financing. If you were to take a credit card advance, or no, if you were to take some funds or a loan for your credit card, even a bank loan, essentially in return for lending the money, it's a promise to pay, essentially. The other way to access capital would be through receivables. And this is really a type of asset financing where you'll use whatever money is owed to you via invoices or work that's been completed, but you haven't been paid for it yet. Essentially, you're waiting for the payment to arrive, but you're able to raise some type of capital based upon the promise to pay, the amount of money that you're going to receive once the order is delivered or completed. Crowdfunding. So this is real popular, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. But crowdfunding, usually it's done over the internet using social media. You can do Facebook, and there are different platforms that you can use as well. I think the next slide shows the different, exactly, GoFundMe is the number one. Everybody's probably heard of GoFundMe. This slide's important because it shows some of the top providers of crowdfunding sources, along with the associated funding fees and the processing fee. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, some of these fees have been minimized or sometimes excluded for certain situations in certain businesses. But this is a nice way. If you have a good social media network, you would open up a GoFundMe account or good GoFundMe campaign, and you would share specifics of your idea, your business idea, your mission, and what you're trying to accomplish. And then people would donate some money to you in your business to help you get going. And these are just some miscellaneous, we call it other, but royalty-based financing. Essentially, if you're an artist, either a music composer or a performer, or an artist doing art, pictures, and paintings, you could be paid, or essentially the funder would take a percentage of your sales, $1 per record or $10 per painting, whatever the agreement is that you have. But that's another way to access capital from your business. And then the very last one that we have here is 401k financing. If you have a previous job with an employer that had a 401k established for you, there are certain regulations and rules that you can follow to withdraw that money to kind of infuse your business with those funds as well. And there are there may or may not be some tax implications. We can look at the details, but that's another way that you can use some money that you've been saving. Hey, I'm not going to retire for another 40 years, 30, 40 years. Let me use this capital, use this money that I've saved to kind of boost my business. And let's get that going with the 401k funds that I have saved.
This thing always cracks me up. So I don't think we've been sitting around for that long, but for individuals that can partake and that are able-bodied in mind, feel free to stretch out a little bit, get your shoulders going, get your elbows out. I'm only just gonna imitate and role model the behavior for the most part. Joel ain't moving. There we go. There we go. All right, thank you. And for those I can see on camera, Sophia's not moving, but you know, she's rolling her eyes, she's smiling. That's exercise enough. Okay. All right. Thank you, Sophia. And everyone else got their camera off, so you all are off the hook. Okay. So really quickly before we go into debt structure, quick review, making sure that everyone is on board and we didn't lose anyone. We talked about the different sources of capital and different defined capital, right? So we talked about debt financing and the fact that that's what we do. So pretty much for debt financing, it's a certain amount that you pay every month towards your principal and interest. So for those of you who have a car loan that's currently out right now, that is a debt finance, right? So if the term if the salesperson probably told you the term of, do you want to finance or do you want to buy it straight out? That is a debt finance. We heard a little bit more about receivables. Receivables can be looked at in terms of as a contract finance, which Anthony talks more about. And if you're unclear about what that is, it's a certain amount of work that you are guaranteeing that you're going to get done by the way of contract or an invoice, and particularly you can get finance for that. And oftentimes that financing is done in segments. So it might have a phase 1 and a phase 2. So you might have a contract with Whole Foods, right, where you're selling your goods, and Whole Foods might want that done. They might want a certain batch done by May 1st and another set of batches done by June 1st. Those are all phases. And so what happened is that you can finance against the work that you are looking to get paid for by Whole Foods. We can do that, and there are other lenders that can do that. That is considered receivable financing or contract financing. We heard about equity. Equity is really the difference between that is the fact that there's a part of that ownership, that structure that you own, and the other half and someone else does. So someone else has a specific share of your company. It could be 5%, 20%, 10%. They have a specific ownership, but also a specific say in the company as well too. When you look at management, so they support you in guidance, but they don't just guide you from the perspective of supporting you. There's some level of ownership that they have within the documentation because it's a part of the overall equity of the business. To talk a little bit more about that in detail, let me know or shoot me a comment, and we can talk about that towards the end. But that's an equity deal. And then we talked a little bit more about royalty, and I think particularly for this case and purpose, royalty really isn't needed, but we can talk about it a little bit more, but I don't necessarily think it's one of those things that you necessarily need to think about right now, considering that I don't believe, and I could just be naively sharing this, but I don't believe we have a lot of entertainment businesses that are looking at royalties as a form of repayment. And if you are, and I'm wrong, send me a message through chat and we can talk a little bit more about that. But I just want to do a recap of what the different sources and means of capital actually is or are before we move on to this next piece. All right. And if we're going too fast, just, hit me on chat and say, yo, Jay, slow down. I'm more than okay with that. All right. So debt structure. There's a whole different list of structures. You've got debt structure, you've got capital structure, particularly with debt structure. We can do a couple examples. It's pretty much you have a group of lenders who's lending towards a specific ask, right? It might be 200,000, it might be 100,000, it might be 500 or $1 million. There's one total ask for the project, and every lender is lending towards that. So they're lending a portion of that general ask. Now, the ones that give the highest of that portion would be a senior secured lender. And then you have your subordinate lenders, right? So I'll get into the liens really quickly, but before I do that, just want to go towards the hierarchy that we're stating here. You've got senior secured, and then you've got subordinate. So these all kind of equal the level of investment or shares that they have towards that one big loan amount. So let's just keep it really simple. Let's just do 2 lenders towards a project deal. You might have, we might be going for $100,000 deal, and you might have Dorchester Bay and Bank of America going towards that and say, hey, listen, and I'm going to pick on Sophia just because she's out there. She's brave enough to put her picture up. Yep, and you got the babies running around in the background. We hear you. We hear you. So let's say we've got a package. It's 100,000, Sophia, and you've got Dorchester Bay and Bank of America that says, "Listen, Sophia, we want to support you towards that dream, and we're each gonna do $50,000, right? So therefore, we might both share first position, right? And so what that means is that if your business goes under, and considering how much that lender puts in, that's the amount that they're going towards, or they're going to recoup or capture once the business goes down or once the business goes under. Another way to look at this too is if you have multiple people, let's say we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 lenders towards one big goal, right? One amount. There's going to be the senior that gets dibs first. So yeah, I remember when, growing up, we'd run towards the kitchen, and let's say we've had, I grew up in a Haitian household. So, usually if it was my favorite dish that was cooked, so let's say dili and legume. Ooh, oh yeah. I know, Joe, you're getting feelings over there. So we would say, I got dibs first, which would mean that, I get the piece of that first. And so this is no different from that structure. You've got all these individuals that are invested into one particular amount, but you have some of the top tier ones are going to get their dibs first. I've got a comment here. I just want to make sure that it's not anything. Oh, shoot, Erlene, bigging up Haiti. I hear you. She put rice up there, but you didn't let me know which rice. What are you talking about? Jean? What are you talking about? The Collet? What are we talking about? Okay, got it. All right, sorry, I'm getting too much. So the Haitians are representing. All right, so let me get back in focus. So so you have this overall structure, and it's all going towards one specific amount, but it's divvied up between who's gonna invest how much versus towards that one amount. And depending on how much that they invest, that gives them first position on the lien, second position on the lien, third or other. And the lien piece just means who's getting paid first and who gets the security first. No different from a mortgage. You might have one mortgage with a particular bank, but then you might have taken out, either with the same bank or another, a second mortgage for whatever reason possible. But that first mortgage is what has first priority. All right. So, okay. If you guys have any more questions about that, let me know. The one final example that I would give is that for Dorchester Bay, particularly for our own experience, is that we have other mission-based lenders in the space. We've got Boston Impact Initiative, we've got Ujima Boston, we've got Leaf, we've got Cooperative New England, a couple of other folks, right? And so what might happen is that we all go towards one particular deal. So it might be the Fairmount Innovation Lab, it might be Anthony's father's barbershop, but we all go towards that one specific goal for one specific ask, and different organizations, depend on who invests in how much, will divvy up what position, what lien each person gets, right? So the business goes under, and if Dorchester Bay is at senior, then Dorchester Bay will go in first and get whatever is left on their loan, and then so on and so on. So that's what it means to have a debt structure. Another reason why it's important to think about debt structure is because we talked about debt as a capital term, and we've talked about equity, we talked about receivables, as well as royalties. Now, what might happen, and equity, what might happen is that this structure, from a capital structure perspective, represents the different funding mechanisms that you're getting from the different institutions. And I don't want to confuse you too much, but like, let's say we have a senior secured lender. That senior secured lender might say, I'm going to do an equity deal, right? So an equity can be, it can start off as a debt and it can convert into ownership. That's a little bit more of advanced in terms of thinking a little bit more about what capital is, but that's a convertible loan, right? So that's a more advanced loan. Let's say we have a second senior lender, but that's investing a little less than what we're investing. Let's say that's Boston Impact Initiative, if you're not familiar. Boston Impact Initiative would probably invest, let's say, I don't know, 30, 40% of the asking price. They may have a subordinate under us, and they might only provide debt financing. Then you'll have this third tier senior subordinate lender, and they might invest just enough for, let's say, some receivable contracting, right? So all that makes up one big debt structure stack. All right. If that's confusing, let me know. I have a question here really quickly. Before we move on to the next slide, I've got a question. Blackboston.com. What is your typical turnaround period for a decision when processing a funding request for accounts receivable secured funding or general credit line, and what that, and let me paraphrase a little bit, 5,000, 10,000 or other is Dorchester Bay minimum.
Sorry, I meant to say what level? What level?
What level? I appreciate that. Thank you. So really quickly, so we're specifically talking about are we saying as it relates to a debt structure?
Yes.
Or just in general?
Was looking for, well, it could be a single funder or it could be a consortium, either way.
Okay.
In general, like when someone comes to you, I mean, I was just trying to get a profile in terms of like minimum coming in terms of what you like to see, that kind of thing. Got you.
So a lot of the profile stuff we're about to get into, and what the typical profile for us looks like, okay, we're going to go into that a little bit more. But just to answer your question right now, because you've asked it, right? It's, if we're talking about a general loan, not necessarily related to debt structure, a turnaround time for us, in all likelihood, I would love to have a turnaround time of less than a month. I would love that. You know, our loan officers, we're mandated to turn a deal around within 30 days or less. Now, considering COVID-19, that is highly unlikely. And then also considering human behavior, and I'm saying human as in us, as in you, in terms of, so what I mean by human behavior, it's you also have to factor in the fact that we're going to give you a list of required documents. Within those required documents have different ramifications, different needs. So for example, we might say as a part of those requirements, I need to understand what your debt structure is. So how many debtors and creditors do you have? How much do you pay them? What does that look like per month, in order for us to really understand what the level of risk you're going into? So that might take you a couple of weeks just to complete. So for us, so generally we like to do 30 days. Our average turnaround time before COVID-19 for most deals and most of our deals with micro loans, we're looking at an average of 13 to 15,000 per deal. That which took us maybe 30 days or a little less, and probably a little over a month. The bigger deals, so we opened up the year with a $100,000 loan and a $50,000 loan with a total of 150. That took us a little over maybe 2 months because we needed to get the documents right. We had to resubmit a couple information, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as well. We also have to present the data to an exclusive committee called the loan committee. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But yeah, so for our turnaround time, but the other piece of your question in terms of general credit line, we don't do credit lines. We do debt financing only. There are other institutions that do credit lines, we don't. And the fact of the matter is, we don't have enough within our portfolio in our capital structure to do line of credit. And in terms of $5,000, $10,000 deals as a minimum, we can do those relatively pretty quickly. All right. But but being in the wake of COVID-19 right now, we're not really sure how fast we can deliver loans just right now, because really there are people that are asking for loans, but majority of people that are coming to us right now are looking for grant funding and general resource. If that answers your question.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so just to get towards what a profile is, and before we talk about our own individual profile businesses, we want to give you what a profile of your general ask looks like, right? And so what we mean by that is you represent different industries. So different industries have different needs. And so as it relates to that, and I'm only pausing because questions are coming in. So individuals are asking for about the slideshow. I believe that we can share that. We'll probably share it in a PDF format. And if you're all fine with that, we will do that. We can definitely share it out with you. So this is a characteristic of the retail industry. As Joel, making sure everyone signs in and RSVP so we can get that information out to you. That's relatively really important. So if you did not RSVP and you pretty much clicked on the link, please be sure to RSVP retroactively or right now, so we can make sure that we have your email and information so we can send information out to you. So for retail, so we've broken this down into a couple areas: lending purpose, business risk, and the financial changes or implications that we have to account for. This is how we view you, right? So you are, obviously we know you are a person, you represent a family, you represent a community. We get all that, right? So we get all that from the get-go when it's time to start a relationship and a partnership with you. We get that. But we're talking about business, we're talking about numbers. And as it relates to that area, we assess risk. That's the bulk of what we do, right? And so risk comes in different forms, different shapes and sizes. And so when you come to us and you're trying to articulate what you're looking for, typically for a retailer, the purpose, considering your industry, considering the makeup of your business and the model as a retailer, here are some things that we're looking for, or the general purpose and ask that we usually get, right? So investment in inventory, right? Seasonal inventory purchases, leasehold improvements, purchase equipment. Okay, so for someone, let's say you've got a retail business, a brick and mortar, oftentimes then at that point, most likely the bulk of the investment that you'll need is going to be towards your inventory. Let's say it's just clothes, shoes and apparel. Majority of that is really going to be within the inventory. If you have a business that's also brick and mortar, particularly retailers often are brick and mortar, there's some level of equipment that needs to be purchased, whether it's POS system, whether it's office supplies or things like that. The leasehold improvements, oftentimes those are the furniture and fixtures that's going into the brick and mortar space. And often sometimes as a startup, you'll need some funding to really kind of get that off the ground, right? And so the business risk. So These are things that we look for as you explain to us why you're in the situation that you are. We have to look at it from a broader, 30,000 foot view level. So, is it the inability to sell your product? And oftentimes it's hard for you to come to that conclusion because everyone thinks they can sell. Everyone thinks that they've got the greatest marketing plan. They figured, we're going to be on social media all day, so we're going to get everything out. And that might not be the case. But, if you have a brick and mortar space, you're also trying to advertise on social media. You're probably, your focus is probably everywhere. So are you really focusing? So which way are you focusing? Are you focusing on making sure that you're generating foot traffic through the door, which entails some of the, local community partnerships, which entails, what your business facade looks like, as well as a social media space. So so is it the ability to sell? What can we do to really kind of address that? What is your product mix? Do you have enough do you have enough accessories to complement a lot of the outfits and wear that you're putting out the store, right? Services provided by your employees. Maybe it's customer service. I'm getting a question that's coming in now. Let me address that really quickly. How do lenders view clients who will need most of their resources funded through a loan, say 80 to 100%? I'm gonna pause on that question. And hey, Anthony, can you just write that question down and let's come back to it? I'm gonna pause on that question because that's a really good question, but I want to come back to it. So these are the lists of the business risk and then financials as it relates, because the problem is that as it relates to the financial implications, all of these correlate, right? So the loan purpose, the business risk itself correlate to a financial decision or an impact. So oftentimes for us, we're looking at, how much inventory do you have and how does that measure up to your accounts receivable? What are your current liabilities? And do you have more liabilities than you have revenue coming through the door? What does that look like for a debt service in terms of you paying down debt? And so all of these things matter, right? And we'll get into the specifics in terms of the numbers on Wednesday. But for the most part, I just want to give you a snapshot of what we're looking for when we assess the risk of your business. And so let's do one more example. Service. So this is if we're lending to the service industry itself. So this is, I'm not going to talk through this because I did it for the first one. But this might be more of a restaurant versus a brick and mortar apparel and shoe wear. And really, okay. No. Go ahead. You good. Because I said I wasn't going to answer towards that. You're right. You're absolutely right. So this is the breakdown of by industry. So this is the financial benchmarks. In our industry, well, I guess not so much, but we tend to call these things KPIs. So these like key performance indicators. All industries, all businesses have indicators that they watch for. And this is how you hold yourself accountable, making sure that you're either keeping up with the industry standards or you're keeping up with just overall goals that you have for your business from a financial perspective. For those who are less familiar, we're looking at from towards this column on the left, AR, accounts receivable. So this is money that you're expecting. So you've probably already delivered the products or the service, but this is what's owed to you. Now, measuring whether or not you're going to collect that's a whole different thing. But accounts receivable is a part of your asset class. Your net fixed assets. These are the assets that you have. Those are long-term. That might be a copier. That might be a building. But these are just long-term assets that you would have. AP, accounts payable. These are your bills. Frankly, that's what it is. Accounts payable are your bills. Oh, look at that baby in the background. She's cute. Sophia's like, I'm having enough of this Johnny Charles guy. So long-term debt. This is just your financing, and we're just measuring them out. Gross profit. This is after accounting for your revenue and cost of goods goods sold. And so we'll talk about that on Wednesday as well too. But this is the first attempt at really kind of understand what your profit margin is before we talk about the different expenses and your operating expenses, and then profit before taxes. So earnings before taxes and operating expenses are just generally both a mixture of fixed and variable costs that you have for your business month in, month out, day in, day out, right? I thought it was more important to really kind of talk through that particular column than really talk about the percentages that are represented within those industries. So that's the column of different indicators that we look at, that we're measuring. And across the top here, from left to right or right to left, these are the different industries, and as it relates to those particular columns, that would be the standard that you would need to have as it relates to the industry specific data. Now, when we talk about industry data, I don't want you to get confused and go, okay, so are lenders oftentimes looking at my business and trying to compare it to an industry? That's not the case, right? The industry data just gives us a kind of like a general overall benchmark of how we should be looking at your business. And then what goes into effect when we look at it is, how does it relate to the community at large? How does it all relate to your own individual professional experience and what you're bringing to the business and the industry? And what does this look like from a timetable perspective? So if you've got goals that are measuring out 3 years, what does that mean as it relates to the industry? Is it a strong industry? Is it a declining industry? Is it an emerging industry? What do all those things mean? But these are kind of like the general industry benchmarks that we're looking at. We're saying, hey, you know, is her accounts receivable at 14% as a retailer? Does that make sense? Why doesn't it? And it may not. It might be 25%. And there might be, you know, general rationale as to why that is. But the overall reason why we put this up is to say we are measuring where you are, what the benchmarks you have in place. And then oftentimes we're giving it to you and say, hey, listen, if you want to generally measure your business and try to figure out where you are as it relates to the industry, here's some industry related data that might be helpful moving forward. All right.
All right, so this slide here shows, the title is right on point, Start Early, Basic Requirements. So with any lender, not just Dorchester Bay, but any of the big banks, anyone really that you come across that you try to procure a loan from, they're really gonna look for these types of financials. Really, I can run through the list real quick, but 2 years of business tax returns. I know many of you here are startups. Bank of America, for instance, won't even, once you tell them, hey, I'm just starting my business, I don't have any tax returns. They'll give you either Johnny's card or my card and, hey, talk to Dorchester Bay. So we do make exceptions, but really we're looking for 2 years of business tax returns, 2 years of personal returns. Most important, just stay up to date with your returns. Don't let them pile up. I've worked with some clients that, oh, they haven't done a return in 3 years. It's like, well, first and foremost, that's the most important. Let's get your taxes in. Let's make sure those are done correctly. And then we can talk about the next step. They're really looking for 3 months of bank statements. And as a business owner, it's really important to keep a separate bank account for your business and your personal expenses. It leaves out any question or any doubt that you're commingling funds. Once a suspicion is once something comes up, then the underwriter will start poking right through it. And you just want to try to stay away from that. It's easy, just set up 2 different accounts, one for the business and one for your personal expenses. Financial statements. So Johnny and I and Brenda, we'll get into it later on this week, but really they're looking for a profit and loss, a balance sheet, a financial snapshot of where your business is at the end of the previous year and to date. So for instance, we would look at 2019, your profit and loss in your balance sheet. And then for 2020, we'd look at your year-to-date totals from January through March. And then we'd ask you to work on projections or provide projections. Johnny's getting into that on Wednesday. We'll show you how to kind of come up with those numbers and how to make the best prediction of where do you think you'll land at the end of the year. We're looking for years in operation, photos of the business. I'll perform a site visit 99% of the time, unless it's a business that you're operating from your home. A copy of the business lease, if and when the business lease is signed, or if it's already signed, we'd like a copy of it just to make sure that the terms are appropriate. Proof of ownership, so there's agreements that are done once you register your business. And we're looking for a copy of a voided check. And really, that's just to be sure that you have, in fact, started your business account. You have a business account established. And when the proceeds of the loan are dispersed, they'll go into that business account that you have. Let me just catch this question real quick. Business in 07 as a sole proprietorship, switched over to an S Corp. Which date should I use when filling out applications?
We'll wait for the end to address.
Okay, perfect. So these are the requirements really that Dorchester Bay has. Any lender would really be looking for this type of information. If you don't have it readily available, if you don't know where to start, you can use myself and our team as a resource, and we can help you put this stuff together. We can create a timeline or a kind of a skeleton of what's needed. And then keep in mind that this is a working list. Some of the items that are submitted may require a little bit of back and forth, or there's another layer that's included with the information that's provided.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. The end game. Any Thanos fans? Marvel? No. DC Comics? No. Okay, I'm just asking because I know for a fact people can't respond, so don't worry about me. I'm a Thanos fan, so as you can see, for a lot of reasons. Oh, I've got a yes. Yeah, all right. Ooh, okay, thank you, L Boogie. I'm gonna refer to you as L Boogie. Thank you, Al Boogie. I appreciate that. We family already. All right. So know your end game. So know exactly where you want to go, where you want to be. Oftentimes when you get in front of the lender, you want to make sure that you have all the answers and you're asking all the questions, similar to what Sock Fat. So yeah, I'm getting distracted, Joe. You know. Anyways, so for the most part, you want to make sure you have all your answers ready to go. Right? There's going to be tons of questions that are coming your way as it relates to your business, and are you prepared? There's a list here, and we'll go through it. But for the most part, you want to just work your way backwards, right? You want to figure out, all right, so how much do I actually need? And then move backwards. At that point, you go, all right, so what do I need in order to get there? And then the last piece is going to be to have a conversation with the lender. Now, as it relates to what we do from a mission-based perspective, we can be one of the first people that you contact, and we can figure what that plan is. But when you go to a traditional lender, it's a little bit different. The order of operation is very different. So how will you use the money? How large of a loan do you need? How will this type of capital benefit your business? How can you pay it back? How will you pay it back? Why are you and your company a good credit risk? That's an awesome question. What if the business fails and you can't repay the loan? What red flags do I need to know about your business? So let's kind of go through it a little bit before we move off of this particular slide, right? How will you pay back? And I think oftentimes people will come to the conclusion that my business is going to be amazing. No one's ever really done it before. You know, I just came up with this genius idea because I've just been a genius all my life. And not to disrespect your particular genius or your brand. Because that's obviously, you know, impactful, important, and meaningful. The issue is that you have to be able to articulate how and in what ways you're going to repay the loan back. And oftentimes the way that you do that is that your financials have to be in order. Your financials have to solve for, if I'm getting a loan of $15,000, and really because it's our average amount, right? So if I'm getting a loan of $15,000 and my repayment is about $297 per month, well, $297.01 per month, then am I breaking even? Do I have enough to pay that down in terms of expenses and make a little bit more off the top to pay myself and employees? What does that look like? You have to have that really figured out, and it has to be articulated in a financial statement. And then there's the overall rationale about the value proposition of your business, which is usually generally done in a business plan, which we'll address pretty quickly. But how are you paying that back? And how are you paying that back per month as a debt? How are you going to pay it back for the next couple of years? So do you have projections for the next couple of years? And do those projections include some type of goal threshold so that you're making over a certain revenue minimum, right? Why will this type of capital benefit your business? So does a debt financing really kind of solve the problem, right? So sometimes we get entrepreneurs that come to us and what they're requesting actually isn't enough, right? And we're not in the business to tell you that you should be getting more money, but if you're coming to us and you're saying, listen, I only need 5,000 because I only want to owe you 5,000. But if your actual issue is that you need inventory, you need additional staffing, you have contracts coming. So for quarter one, you absolutely need to make sure that you got 20,000 in sales. You actually might need 20,000. So even if you don't get it from us, you also need to parse out the different ways that you're going to go about getting and solving for your total need. So is it really enough? So we know that you don't want to borrow so much. So do you need some type of phase structure where you borrow 5,000 for this month, and if you accomplish this amount, then you do another 5,000 another month. So it's really kind of thinking through what does that mean for you and your business, and that's what we mean by really kind of thinking it through. What is the end game? Don't let somebody else tell you what your end is. You got to let us know. You know what? Let me address the red flags really quickly. So what red flags do I need to know about your business? So for those of you who and I think this is what happens with kids, right? So, my son is he's a well-mannered guy. So he's not like I was, right? Where every day there was an issue with me. Every day it was a phone call. But my son won't be the first one to tell me every issue that came with as to why I'm getting called as a parent from the school, right? So I know for me as a young person, if my father got a call from school, he only heard part of the issue. And then when I talked about it, he only heard another part of the issue, but not the full expanse and the full extent to what it actually was. What that mean is, with all jumbled up, what that mean is, are you telling us the full story as it relates to all the different red flags that we should be looking out for? So when we pull a credit report, does it have a bankruptcy notice on it? When we look at your financials from last year, did you record a loss, right? And have you been recording a loss? Tell us up front what it is. I've had, not to put anyone out there because I know they're not on the call, but I've had somebody show me their financials, and in their bank statements, they've got child support coming out of the business account. That just doesn't work, right? That doesn't make any sense. So tell us up front what all the issues are, so we have to prevent going back to try to rectify it and correct it before presenting this information elsewhere. So let us know. So let us know what the red flags are to the extent that you know, and that helps and prevents a lot of the stalling moving forward. Yeah. So the 5 C's. So feel free to read them on your own. I'll go through them lightly because I know we've got some questions coming through. So we talked about trust. So there's a level of commitment that goes into character, right? So for those of you who are less familiar, who aren't really thinking of it this way, once you go into a lending relationship with an institution, sorry to tell you, for those of you who are like, I ain't really trying to be in a relationship right now, you actually are. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, the loan officer is with you. Like, we together. You know what I mean? Like, that's just what it is. Sophia's laughing because she's like, I don't want none of this stuff. But the problem is that we together, right? So we have to, so when we talk about character, I need to know if I'm dealing with Sophia, if I'm dealing with Anthony, Joel, or Brenda, for the next 5 years, the term. So usually our terms are about 5 years, right? And generally most terms are, unless it's really unless it's really kind of like a special case scenario, right? And which we can do. But generally, they're a term of 5 years. We have to think about that in terms of a relationship. If I know for a fact that I've been exchanging documents back and forth with Brenda, and and I've said conclusively, hey Brenda, I need 10 pieces of information, and I know for a fact every single time she emails me back, it's only 2 out of the 10. Come on, bye Felicia. That don't work, right? It just doesn't work, right? So if constantly that we're going back and forth and we can't agree on one simple thing, then most likely that's a telltale about how the relationship is gonna be for the next 5 years. And this is less for you to get disappointed or stray away from it, but it's for you to really understand that if you're talking to a lender, that person is thinking about what their relationship is going to be with you from an institution perspective and from a personal perspective, what that's going to look like. And it's also the same thing for you, right? Like, you don't want to be dealing with a loan officer that you can't really trust, that you don't really want to talk to for the next 5 years, because they will be calling you up, they will be doing site visits, provided that that's planned. But it's a relationship. So make sure that that's the kind of relationship that you want to get into. Capacity, your ability to repay, point blank and simple. And then for a capital standpoint, we want to make sure you have sufficient liquidity, and that comes down to your inventory and your cash flow. But we're less so worried about that. I think for us is we want to know, we would love it that you're profitable, but we just want to know that there's cash coming in, or there's cash scheduled to come in. What does that look like, and how do you prove that to us, right? So if you're saying that you're going to open up within the next month, and that for a fact that you have enough demand to make sales, okay. So then we're probably going to ask, hey, listen, what is, if you're going into a brick and mortar scenario or situation, then what is the lease agreement? What does the lease agreement look like? From the standpoint of revenue, how does your revenue, proportion-wise, how does it measure out to your lease agreement? So are you paying a lot more? Are you paying 20 or 30% of your overall expected revenue? What does that look like? And all that goes in towards capital, and you being able to prove that you've got enough capital and cash flow to actually move forward. And then the collateral piece, which we can get back. Let's get back to collateral, because collateral is pretty important. That's people usually want to know that. I'll just say off the rip that most lending institutions are going to want collateral, because that's going to be the security, right? That's security people are going to put a lien on. Particularly for us, we don't necessarily always require collateral, and that's a case-by-case basis. But if you are, I can't front. If you are doing something that's over 20,000, most likely we're going to need some type of collateral on that, and that might be inventory, or that might be mortgage. But oftentimes collateral is required. But for a smaller loan with us, we don't typically like to force collateral onto you. We have alternatives for that. So $15,000 and lower, we usually don't try to enforce or impose a collateral mandatory. But over that $15,000 threshold, over that $20,000, we typically do. But most lenders, for all loans, anything that needs to be secured will need to be secured by collateral. And then lastly is conditions. And I said I wasn't gonna get into all these, but I get carried away, so I apologize. Conditions. Typically, what is it that you're going through as a business? What is the industry experiencing? What is, if it's, we don't necessarily deal with inventions and intellectual property, but, is there an invention that you came up with, and is economically, is it right for the implementation of that invention, right? So I'm just going for a broad case scenario. So conditions are based on what you're going through, what the industry is going through, the location, all of that. All right, perfect. Now, I know COVID-19 was up here. Oh, okay, I see where that's coming from. So we're gonna go into resources really quickly, which might address some the latest comment. Brenda, take it away.
All right, so we wanted to share a list of resources for small businesses that were impacted by COVID-19. The first three you will see are SBA programs. The first one is the SBA Paycheck Protection Program, which it's mostly for you to keep your employees for approximately 8 months. You can also use the funds to pay let's say bills or your mortgage or your rent for your current location. So that's one that we recommend everyone to apply to, anyone who's been impacted by COVID-19, any small business. There's also the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Actually, let me go back to the Paycheck Protection Program. You will see a link there so you can find SBA lenders who are participating in this PPP program. Unfortunately, Dorchester Bay is not doing the PPP program, the economic injury, or the express bridge loan that I will talk about, but there is a list of PPP approved lenders, and as well as the express bridge loan. You can click on the link and you can see a list for that. But let me talk about the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This is an SBA product. You can click on the link and you can apply directly there. And these funds can be used, again, to do payroll. If you need any bills you have to pay, pretty much similar to the Paycheck Protection Program. Just keep in mind that you cannot double dip. You can't use the economic injury funds and also the paycheck protection funds in order to pay for the same thing. So just keep that in mind, and all of that, if you click on the link, you can read the details on it. And then the SBA Express Bridge Loan. This is a loan you can take in the meantime. I believe the turnaround time isn't too long. It's less than 3 weeks if I'm not mistaken, but it doesn't take as long as the economic injury or the PPP for you to receive the funds. So you can apply for the Express Bridge Loan and make sure that you include that loan when applying for the economic injury loan so you can pay that bridge loan back. So just make sure to keep that in mind. A couple other loans would be Mass Growth Capital. Unfortunately, I believe they're out of funding, but they're applying for more funds, so just keep an eye out for that. There's also the Foundation for Business Equity. You can either get a loan or a grant. And as you'll see, the rest of these are grants, which is Facebook Small Business Grants, Hello Alice, She Moisture, Spanx, Verizon, and then the Restaurant Strong Fund. All of these are grants that you can apply for. So click on the links once we send these over to you, and you can read all the details there. But they're all for small business, minority, or women-owned businesses. And then the next slide are a couple more resources. There's a work share, temporary workplace shutdowns, and a couple more benefits that you can click and look into and apply, which would make it a lot easier for you and your employees.
Perfect. Thank you, Brenda. So we wanted to make sure that towards the end of this, and then we'll transition over for some questions, some Q&A, but we wanted to make sure that we share some tips that we've gotten along the way, considering all that everyone is dealing with, particularly with caring for loved ones, whether it's young children, and the anxiety and the patience that's required, particularly for teenage age children, younger kids such as mine at 8, which are just curious and nonstop. And then you've got some age parents, age adult parents, as well as the whole family structure, right? And so I also let's also acknowledge the fact that typically as communities of color, we tend to be or lead as caretakers in a lot of different ways. And so when I think the old saying was, when America catches a cold, Black folks catches a flu or pneumonia, it's all the same things. Right now, the flu and pneumonia is being caught by all folks of color, all of them that are dancing around the margins. So just want to extend special hugs and appreciations and upliftment for our community, which includes all Black and brown. So with that being said, manage stress and anxiety with different forms of stress alleviators. Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's put some of them up a little bit more. Yep, one more. Okay. So some helpful tips, right? So 10-minute break. I oftentimes, so I'm going to go into this as a disclaimer. Let me just say this, because I hate when folks give me instructions or tips and they don't take it themselves. So I'm going to say that as a human being, I am managing and battling and doing some of these same things myself. So I don't expect that we're going to give this and everyone just does it because we say it, right? I myself are trying to manage just some of these things and try to adhere to them. And I know that they're helpful, but we also know that it's hard to implement in real time. So we want to acknowledge that as well too. Consider limiting your coronavirus media consumption. I know that's particularly hard to do. I'm an early riser, so I tend to hit the current events pretty early. And I also try to do some silent meditation time, but sometimes that's also interrupted as well too. But being mindful to make sure that as you're taking things in, that you get a breather in, that you have some type of time that's not necessarily dedicated to hearing anything more about Corona. And I know that's hard to do, but it most likely to be helpful in these days and times. Talk to friends and family. And sometimes talking to friends and family, you might need to walk away from that too, because that might bring about some other stress as well. But obviously with the friends that you know, and obviously being intentional, making sure that you specifically state what you don't want to talk about, sometimes that's helpful as well too. Engage in physical activity. I think the different times of the day work for different people. For me, it's usually in the morning. For others, it's usually in the evening. But making sure that you're physical. Like if you're anything like me, I'm getting aggravated by gaining weight being at home. I am at home doing video conference calls. No shade on this video conference call. But oftentimes I'm sitting in front of the computer and then I'm walking away eating and then I'm chasing my kid and then I'm back to video conference calls. And so that can be stifling, right? And it can also not make enough space in the room just to be physical and to be active, but try to engage in physical activity is also just helpful. And special attention to breathing. I've had a good friend of mine that always reminds me, did you breathe today? And I think sometimes we coast through the everyday life thinking that we do the essentials, but we really don't, right? Like we're breathing to get by, but we're not breathing to really kind of take in the everyday life. And again, these are things that I'm also working to try to do myself. So paying attention to your breathing and then drinking lots of water. Take in some water. It helps. It's not just good for your skin. It's good for the rest of your body as well too. It's a great practice. And then reflect, and I've been doing that lately as well too. And I think I do it often, but I think for most, and I'm using a lot of my own personal experiences because I think it's hard just to try to give advice and share things without really including yourself, right? So, it's good to reflect, whether it's on the day, whether it's on just your personal journey, but being able to do that because I think it's easy not to, right? And then, as always, positive perspective. And this goes a long way. It goes a very, very long way. So it's one thing to see the coronavirus information at every corner. It's another just to deal with family and friends and not being able to really kind of escape because of the stay-at-home mandate. And then also trying to get away and watching television, but not all these things all at the same time represent a positive reflection of what's happening, right? And so sometimes it's going to take you to kind of enforce some positive perspective. So trying on the different lens in terms of how things are and being and staying in a space of being grateful will help with that. And so try to appreciate some of the little things, right? All right. So with all that said, let's bring on some of the questions. Yes, Papa. You want to say hi since everybody's listening to you? You want to lean in and say hi?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Eli.
Hi.
Before we go into the questions real quick, I just wanted to add a couple of things, Johnny, to what you were saying with the self-care.
Yep.
I think one of the major things for me too has been sleep. I can say that, you know, now that we're all at home, I find myself getting up really early and just going straight to emails at like 6 a.m. And then I can be online until like the wee hours of the night or the next morning. So like, you know, kind of like not having a steady routine. So I think having a set schedule for yourself, like, you know, when you're going to shut down, you're going to shut, you know, you're going to, like, if you're working 9 to 5, work your 9 to 5 and actually like do your self-care. Make sure that you're shutting off your phone and your devices by a certain time where you have at least an hour and a half, couple of hours to like settle down, like let your system actually settle within itself and center itself before you're going to sleep. Because I also find that when I'm not doing that, I'm really restless. You know, I'm not having a good night's sleep. So I think, you know, that goes hand in hand with the breathing and meditating and all of that. But also, you guys, if you are not on FIL's mailing list, I will be adding everybody who registered, who RSVP'd onto the mailing list. We send out newsletters, and we are often promoting a lot of resources online as like online yoga or meditation, or there's also online therapy sessions as well, because we know this is a stressful time for everyone. One of our workshops that we have coming up is goal setting during COVID-19, because we know that sometimes it can be difficult to stay on task. So it's almost an accountability group, I would say. So for the first week, we're identifying SMART goals and creating a realistic to-do list. That's going to start on April 21st. Then on April 28th, it'll be what a daily and weekly routine should include. Week 3, create an accountability community. And then week 4, it's prioritize your schedule. So I think that we are a community, right? And so the resources are there. So just making sure that you guys are like staying connected and just making in reading. And when you get these things, as we send out the newsletters. Not only do we have, you know, workshops that help you in your business, that help you in your wellness, but then there's also like, you know, online happy hours, or, you know, like things to really get your mind out of this, you know, like, yes, we can't all be together, but there's ways for us to adjust, you know, like, thank God we have internet, we have electricity, that we can do this kind of a thing, even though we are in the stay-at-home mandate. But yeah, so in any case, yeah, there's just a lot of resources. Please make sure you're tapping into them. So yeah, we'll go right into the questions.
Thanks, Joelle.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Johnny, I've been keeping track. The first one, we'll try to get to them all. If
Okay.
I skip anyone, let me know. But so the first one, how do lenders view borrowers who need 80 to 100% of resources loaned?
Mm-hmm. So just for clarification, is that a borrower who is a startup? Because if they're a startup, that's understandable, right? So if you need 80 to 90% of the funding that you're putting in to starting a company, that's completely reasonable. If you are, so the general rule when it comes to borrowing for working capital, and there are two equations or two formulas for working capital that we'll address tomorrow, but I'll go ahead and say it anyway, right? Spoiler alert, which is, current liabilities minus your current assets, right? And you can only do that if you have a balance sheet. So if you don't have a balance sheet, you've never created one, you don't have one for your business, then it's okay. We'll figure that out. The other is your liquid cash and savings added plus your inventory minus your payables, which is your bills. So I'll say it again. So the two formulas for working capital, and I'll go back to the question. So the two formulas for working capital, and this is what this question is really addressing, is your current assets minus your current liabilities. Your liabilities are the bills that are, you know, less than a year, or what you owe within less than a year that you have to pay back. And then your current assets are your inventory and your cash. When you subtract those two categories, you'll have your working capital. The other formula for this is you're taking your cash, you're adding your inventory, and you're subtracting your liabilities. To be honest with you, if you think about them intuitively, they're actually the same equation, right? So, but that's what you absolutely need in terms of a working capital. The rule of thumb for working capital when you're going for funding is usually requesting 30 to 40% of what your revenue actually is. So that's general working capital. So back to the overall question, right? If you're looking for 80 to 90% of the total funding, then you might need to clarify what that question is. But if I'm getting it correctly, if it's 80 to 90% of your total operation, if that's what you're saying, then the only case that a lender will lend to you is if you are suggesting you're doing something completely different with your business, right? That you're adding a whole different clientele, that you're moving into a whole different industry or segment, then okay, then a lender would hear that. But outside of that, it's a lot of money, right? Because 80 to 90 of your operations doesn't necessarily equal out to your revenue level. So if you want to clarify that, then let me know. If you find that confusing as a response, let me know in the chat as well too, and I'll definitely address that a little bit more.
Okay, Jason responded. He seems to have a better understanding or an answer to the question that he had. So I think you did a good job on that one, Johnny.
Thank you.
All right, the next question. So this one, I don't know the answer. I'm going to ask you. This person started a sole proprietorship in 2007 and then changed it over to an S Corp in 2008. So which date do you use as a start date on the application?
I would have to ask more questions about what exactly did you change? Was it okay, so if you kept the same name, then it's the same business, right? And so all you did was change the entity formation of it. And so therefore your tax implications are different. Now, outside of that, I would probably put in the earlier, so the 2017 formation, and then in the clarification in terms of your business, you would articulate to us, you know, by word, not necessarily by the financials, but by word, that there was a transition in terms of the entity formation. But I think you're fine. If, you know, I would use the 2017 date because that gives you a little bit more leverage, because it suggests because you've been around longer that you have a little bit more experience that adds to your overall character. So I would use 2017, but just clarify that there was a change. Now, we had talked about red flags and spotting red flags and letting us know what red flags are to look for. So if you submit an application to a lender and the lender finds out based on their due diligence and research that you changed formation, entity formation, and you didn't let them know, now that might look like tax evasion. That might look like under the old filing that you may have had a lawsuit. So therefore you didn't want, you know, based on the lawsuit or whatever it was, however it was crafted, you didn't want to be found out. You want to be identified as a different business so you don't have to deal with the ramifications of a former lawsuit. So that's what it could look like to a lender. But for the most part, just explain that there was an entity change and that you've been around since 2017.
Right. That's a good answer. Exactly. It shows history. It shows that the company has been around for a certain amount of time.
Right.
And it gives a little more credibility as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right. One of the other questions that I picked up in the chat, this is with regard to a business account. And they were asking, is it just an additional account on the existing account that I have? I know Bank of America, for instance, you can have a checking account and then you can open up another savings account that's tied to your checking account.
Mm-hmm.
What we're really looking for is, sorry, I'm presenting the question with the answer, But in this case, what we're looking for is a separate account with a different account number, and even the account owner will show up as the business entity or the LLC, whatever it is. It won't really have a name associated with it. It's going to have the business name as opposed to a personal name. Of course, when you get started, you can, as a way to not commingle funds, you can have your personal account and then all your business funds go into a separate account. But really what we're looking for, either when the loan is dispersed or just after the loan is signed off on and approved, is an actual separate business account that's set up by the company.
I have a quick question on that.
You got it? Yeah.
So what if this is an artist, like this is a freelancer and they don't necessarily have a business entity?
Yeah. So, I mean, each case it's specific by each case that comes through the door. And we'll advise you the best way to do it. You don't necessarily, in your case, yeah, it's an artist. Maybe they make a couple $1,000 and it's not really, it could be a hobby or a part-time endeavor that they're pursuing, but it is generating income. It's just from a lender's perspective, I'm putting on the lender goggles, lender glasses here. I don't want to see any commingling of funds. I want to be able to draw a clear distinction between these are your personal funds and your personal finances, and then this is the business finances, the business funds, and the business activity.
So I could have 2 separate accounts.
Yeah. So you can. If it's, Johnny, I don't know, what would you say? What's the threshold for revenue to?
Yeah. All right. So for this particular question, I would rather, if we're going to separate the two, that you have more than just an account to verify that you're a business, that your account is connected to a sole proprietorship that's also indicated in your taxes. That's the only time. So yes, it's fine that you have a separate account, but I need that tied to the business itself. And we're going to be able to see that when we look at the bank statements, because as Anthony referred to earlier, we're going to look at 3 months of bank statements, and we're going to connect that back to the organization itself. And so as long as you're a sole proprietor, if you started that year, then you're okay. But if you started beyond a year, then it needs to be recorded in your taxes. And let me just emphasize why the taxes are important, because Anthony had mentioned this before. So both mission-based lenders as nonprofits and the traditional banking system as banks, we oftentimes are administering tax dollars through the SBA. So the money that we're giving back out is already your money, right? So the money is tax money that's from the people. So, but in order for us to refund or redeploy that back into the community, we need to know that you did your due diligence and that you paid your taxes. Because it makes no sense for us to deploy tax hard-earned dollars from the general community if you as a community member didn't pay your taxes. So that's the connection between why the taxes are important. And then so sometimes people will try to go around it and go, well, I didn't do my taxes, so therefore you can understand it's a lot of money to do taxes as a small business. We get that, right? If you need to use some of the funds that you get from a lending perspective to support your taxes, then by all means, I say I support that. But the down payment and the investment in getting your taxes done has to come from you. So it's really important because the two connect with each other.
Perfect. Thanks for the clarification there. And I'm just going through the chat, and Laura makes a good point as well. It's clear fiscal structure and clear business structure as well. It's a good habit to get into. Black Boston posed a question. I'll read it here. How is your invested cash into the owner's equity column valued in the ratio formulas? It goes to business liability column, I assume.
No, not necessarily. We could talk about it. But the equity overall, and for clarification, are we talking about a particular slide? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay. I was looking at the discussion about the ratios when you had to subtract one element from another element, there was like those two formulas you gave us. See, looking at my notes, one was current liabilities minus assets.
Yep.
And the other one was current assets. Well, I may have taken my notes wrong, but anyway, it's related to those two formulas.
Gotcha. Okay. But the owner's equity and the owner's draw is different, right? So that's going to be, that's going to be, a really lame, basic way to talk about it without really illustrating it. Because a lot of that we're going to review on Wednesday so we can see exactly where everything is. What we won't do on Wednesday, feel free to ask about it, but what we won't do on Wednesday, we won't go through all the financial sheets, because I think that's overwhelming. And I think that's something that we can do one-on-one in terms of the balance sheet, the income statement, and the cash flow. What we're specifically going to talk about is how do we create the profit and loss, and how do we create projections, and the way that we are prescribing folks to do it. But in terms of the equity conversation, that tends to be within the balance sheet and in the shareholders section, right? And a lot of that is going to be the residual from the liabilities as well as the total assets. So if we're gonna measure the equity in a company, there's a couple of different formulas for that. And considering the level of investment or the stage of business that some of these businesses are in, we don't tend to look at that just yet. If from a perspective of the average deals that come in, we don't tend to look at the owner's equity just yet. We'll take a look at, from an owner's equity perspective, we'll probably put in like, all right, so what was the startup funding? What did you use? What did you initially invest in the company? And we'll use that and characterize that as the ownership structure or the ownership piece of the company in terms of equity. But we don't necessarily do ratios and break that down as much, because a lot of our small businesses don't tend to come in with a lot of equity. So
okay.
So I just want to address that. So I guess, and another way to answer this question is, the formulas that you saw earlier, the ones that I talked about, had nothing to do with equity.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
But feel free, like on Wednesday, for example, when we talk about the financial structure, feel free to just shoot whatever question you have about the equity piece. I mean, if you need to do it now, you can do it. But we measure it very differently.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Johnny, I believe this one might be the last one right now, but as a newly filed LLC, what would be my best option for funding?
Well, just because you filed an LLC doesn't really tell me much. It all depends on the business structure, the debt that you're coming into. But I would need a little bit more just to understand exactly. But if you're saying that you're just a new business and you filed as an LLC, then congratulations. But in terms of what your goals are, what your needs are as it relates to finance and capital, that wouldn't tell me enough of what that is just yet. And if you know what it is, feel free to unmute yourself and tell me. But if you don't, and you want to talk about it a little bit more on Wednesday when we do some of the financial stuff, it can wait till then as well. So either one is fine.
One just popped up from Sophia. If I have investors already and I come in for a loan, do I have to state what they are coming to the table with?
Yes. Yes, you do. Unfortunately, you do. I mean, we'll keep it discreet as possible, but you do. We need to understand exactly the sources and uses of funds. Like how much is it that's in the business now in terms of equity? How much are you looking for? What is it going to be used for? And then how do you repay the debt that you're using, right? So we need to understand that. If we don't have a whole sense of the business, then it makes it really hard to lend. And just to let you know, we don't necessarily we don't require a business plan, So, which is why the financial structure and model of your business, whether you're projecting it out or it's existing, you need to be able to tell us what that is, or we need to be able to articulate it along with you and for you, because that's what we're going off of outside of the supporting documents. And then I know that there was a question about credit. Yeah, and credit goes a long way, right? And so a lot of our work is, so just to say, right, we are successful if we do what? And that's a very loaded statement, but we are successful if you're able to get, after borrowing from us and successfully paying us back, that you are able to connect or reconnect with a traditional bank, whether it's for line of credit, a term loan, credit card, that's a business-based credit card, or whatever the mechanism is. But for us, it's really get you to back onto the traditional market so that you can bank with your business. If you're coming to us, it's really because you cannot go through the traditional means. That's why we're the alternative to the banks no. And that's the position that we sit in. But we are unsuccessful if you get lending from us and they keep coming back to us every year for more money. That means that we haven't done our job. So yeah. So part of our work is really the logic theory is to really get you lending or borrowing from a traditional bank and understanding what the bank is looking for, what they need from you, and vice versa.
So you're a credit building loan?
Yes and no.
Okay, explain that.
So, I mean, credit building loan is really just solely about credit building. Like we'll report out on the credit report that you're paying us back, and that's great. Oftentimes ours is a lot more than that because it comes with the technical assistance. It comes with introductions to other businesses. It comes with a little bit more of a hand holding. So it's not solely credit building, but it is a function of what we do. Yes.
I did catch a couple of questions before. I had stepped away, so I'm not sure if you already answered them, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody got their questions answered. There was a question about, a couple of people had this question about around the fear of applying for loans right now, given the state of things. They were afraid of not being able to repay the loan. What would you say to that?
Yeah, so I think I think a couple of things. One is that fear makes sense. It aligns with a lot of our thinking for the most part. And for those who are not looking for loans or looking for grant funding, that's the way you should go. For lending for us, we and Brenda can talk to this, may not be right now. But if you're taking loans out with us right now during COVID-19, understand that it is our responsibility. It's our responsibility to be flexible and reflective of the current state of the economy. So what that means is that I think Brenda has laid out 3 options in terms of how you can borrow from us. That's a little bit more favorable. Now, understand before you even go to the next level of trying to figure out what your loan deal should look like, that it is a loan and there is a repayment period for it. When we say favorable and making sure that we're reflective, it's making sure that when it's time for you to pay, or the pay period itself should be pushed back towards when we all kind of get back online, when the economy is operating at a place that it's actually healthy. But without further, I think for us, we need to be responsible. We need to lend responsibly. So that means that we don't lend too much, and that we do it in a way that's particularly favorable for you.
That is correct, Johnny. And I just wanted to add that the SBA loans that we have on the slide, I believe there's a 12-month period where you have to make no payments. So, the SBA is understanding. And then for the disaster loan, there is an amount that is forgiven, which is it comes in a grant form, which again, it's also on their website. So everyone's definitely trying to lend responsibly at this point.
Yep, and then we have our own options in terms of in-house for us, what that looks like for us. And I know that we're pressed for time because we've got about 4 minutes. Is there any final questions really quickly? Because I know I have a 1 o'clock as a hard stop I know some of you do as well. You don't? Great. So I have an outro song. And I wanted to put this up. And the outro song is connected. Hi. The outro song is connected to, for those of you who watch and follow Code Switch on NPR, that's where I got it from. So I didn't make the connection, but NPR had a special, and they had their own outro song, and they talked about this particular song. And it's for those of y'all who are within the culture, who know what I'm talking about. It is from the Waiting to Exhale soundtrack, Shoot, which is one of my favorite songs. And so I want us to go out on a positive note and stay positive in terms of our perspective. But I also thought that this song was pretty meaningful with the current times. And I think sometimes you can't really control too many things, but the one thing you can is yourself. So being able to exhale and understand that we're all human in this process is also just very important. So hopefully all of you and plus more will come out on Wednesday at 11 for the next phase of this, when we go in a little deeper into the financial modeling piece and understand that the financial models that we're going to talk about, we're going to share it with you so that you have it. So there's nothing here that we're going to keep to ourselves. So community preservation is number one for us. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. My homie, my girl, Whitney Houston, rest in peace. Shoot. Candle. Sometimes it's right. For every win, someone must fail. There comes a point when you excel. Yeah, yeah. Hey, shoot, 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 shoot. All you got to do is say, shoot, 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 shoot. I love you, shoot, shoot. Sometimes you lie. Signing off, guys. Bye. Life never tells us.
Have a good day.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Make sure to exhale.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You will exhale.